Hello and good afternoon. I'm Michael Casey. I'm the Chief Content Officer at CoinDesk, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. So today we're going to be talking about tokenized economies. What does that mean? Well, we'll let the panel discuss that. But I think one of the things that's really interesting about the title, it sort of has this something coming alive. And what strikes me about that is, like, we're in this moment. Everyone seems to understand crypto is having a bit of a moment right now. And there's a big discussion around, is it worth anything? Is there anything actually useful that's happening in this space? And the reality is, there's a lot. And a lot of it revolves around how aspects of our lives are being tokenized, and sometimes in ways we don't even understand. And there's a lot that's happening. In fact, in a meeting that I was in this morning, we talked about whether or not we should get away from the word use case and start talking about case studies, because case studies is a discussion about what's actually happening. So we're going to go through that. And I think, Jeremy, yesterday you were on stage with Neil Ferguson and Katie Martin, who's a tremendous reporter who used to actually work with me at Wall Street Journal. Asked a question, isn't it about time that crypto did something useful? And I think hopefully what we'll do is a bit of a discussion of the fact that there's actually a lot going on. Before we get into that, though, very, very quickly, because we have limited time, each of you just introduce yourselves if you could. That's the easiest way to do this. Jeremy.
Sure. I'm Jeremy Allaire. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Circle. We operate and issue the largest regulated digital dollar in the world, USDC. And have founded the company 10 years ago, and it's an infrastructure and digital currency company, and we'll connect the dots to the theme, I'm sure, in the conversation.
Beryl?
Hi, I'm Beryl Lee. I'm co-founder at Yield Games. We are a guild of guilds. We actually acquire a number of NFT gaming assets, and we started in the Philippines when we lent our NFT assets to our communities, and now we see ourselves in Latin America, India, and most emerging markets.
Top.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for having me here, and I'm glad to be back again this year. My name is Top from Thailand. We are the largest blockchain and digital asset group of companies. We have everything from the regulated digital asset exchange, from NFT marketplace, from our own blockchain, our own, academy. We have our own ventures. Overall, we have 1,000 employees in Thailand, and we became the first Thai fintech unicorn in the country.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow, congratulations. Timo.
Good afternoon, it's great to be here. I'm Timo Harakka, the Minister of Transport and Communications of Finland. And I tried to make the deal with other panelists that for once, when you have a politician on stage, he would just listen and the others could talk, because it's a big learning curve for me to kind of get to the grips of Web 3.0 and all the aspects of it. And we in the government are trying to make the sense and the implications, regulatory and legislation implications of Web 3.0. And this is really an educational moment for me.
Yeah, so you can happily listen, but I'm not doing a deal. You will be called upon and you will have to speak. Okay, good. Listen, Jeremy, why don't I throw to you, because there's something interesting about the role that I think Circle plays as, essentially a participant in all these other ecosystems. The USDC, the stable coin that Circle issues, it's being used in all these environments. And I think you're probably getting an interesting perspective about the variety of tokenized activities there. So maybe you can just give us a landscape description, perhaps.
Sure, and actually, I think a lot of the conversation is often around, how do we get real world utility, and what is the value of tokenization and everything else. And I think our vision was, how can we use the benefits of blockchain technology, which is an open environment for transactions, immutable records, global interoperability, a lot of these advantages, and tokenize the dollar. And so, we're not trying to introduce a new currency to the world. We're trying to take the power of this technology and imbue that power onto the dollar. And as I like to say, give the dollar the superpowers of the internet. And so, The phrase tokenizing real-world assets is something that people are talking about a lot now. Well, the dollar happens to be probably the most important real-world asset in the world, and we've tokenized that in a regulated way, and so it's a foundational building block, and because blockchains are open and programmable to anyone in the world, exactly what you said, we find ourselves at connecting to so many other case studies, whether they be international transactions, cross-border transactions, remittance transactions, capital markets transactions, lending transactions, as a payment medium, so many use cases, that you have for a dollar, but bringing that to a kind of use on the public internet in an open interoperable.
Before we jump to Beryl, who will give us a case study, the programmability is interesting here, right? Why don't we can you just drill down on that into a little bit here? You said the power of the internet. It's almost like, in the meeting I just had at Circle, we talked about money as a unit of account, store of value, and of course a medium of exchange. But now in an internet, in a tokenized environment, it becomes programmable. Like, yeah. What do we mean by that? What is the power of the internet in this programmable sense?
I mean, there are a couple of ways to think about that. I think the first is, I think we all intuitively grasp that when we've digitized something like a photo or a piece of content or something else, that it becomes this thing that's shareable and transmittable and in the world. It becomes this tangible digital thing that is in the world. And that's really powerful because we intuitively understand I can take that photo and I can beam it anywhere to anyone and it just works. And so that's one, is that you have a token that represents a dollar and it can do that. But the blockchain technology, the fundamental innovation is that you can also write code that can interact with those assets. So you can write code that, for example, says, release this value to someone based on an event that happens. Or I want to put value into this contract, and someone else can use that value for a period of time and pay it back with an interest rate. And so you have the ability to write contracts. Those could be contracts that are written about a particular commercial relationship. Those could be traditional financial contracts, and write code to interact with that. That just has never been possible before, and never been possible, at least in a way in which that code lives on the internet and is trusted and secure, and anyone can interact with it. So right. It's a breakthrough, and programmable composable money it's a mouthful, but is sort of lighting up the utility value of money. It's lighting up the utility value of money in just extraordinary ways, and we're kind of like in the 2006, 2007 era of this, where all these people had ideas about smartphones and mobile apps and what you could do, but nothing had actually been invented. And then the platforms emerged, and it's extraordinary what people have been able to invent with writing code to put on a mobile device. And so we're in a similar place in terms of the applications that will be built that use programmable money.
Okay, and so Jeremy just said something, Beryl. He said, an event happens, and then you can pay somebody with tokens, right? That's, in some respects, at its core, what's happening in the kind of games that YGG is working with, right? So, tell us what opportunities, what are these uses that you're seeing for this programmable, tokenized existences?
So I can speak in the perspective of gaming, right? So there are 3 billion gamers in the world. So we've actually looked into Roblox or World of Warcraft, where gamers are actually trading shields and swords or building certain gaming assets on Roblox. But whenever they actually exchange hands of these assets from one person to another, they don't own the assets. They don't actually maximize the profitability of these assets that they actually create or they've actually utilized. But with Web3 gaming, there's the ability to actually utilize these gaming assets to actually play in the game, and in exchange they're able to actually earn in-game rewards, for example, which could actually be exchanged into real-world assets. For example, go to Starbucks, or into another form of cryptocurrency or stablecoin. right? So a classic example was during the pandemic in the Philippines, where play to earn actually started with a game called Axie Infinity. You're able to actually play the game with battling with 3 Axies, in exchange earning in the form of Smooth Love Potion, SLP. But then players figured out that they're able to actually convert these into Philippine pesos or fiat, and they're able to actually buy milk for their kids, put food on the table during a time when everyone is actually on lockdowns, right? It was also very interesting because there is a proliferation of various roles in this new economy. So with tokenization, it's actually in the form of non-fungible tokens or gaming assets.
Right. There's a whole other. There's a tokenizing not of the money in this case, but of these assets, these digital objects in a way. You know, I think one of the things that people sometimes say, okay, so gaming, you know, what's the utility in that? And yet the reality is, like, how big is the gaming world? How many people play games worldwide?
So worldwide, there's about 2.9 billion, so almost 3 billion people in the world playing games. Okay. They're indulged in esports, and an average gamer actually spends 14% of their waking hours playing games.
So you get a sense of what that economy is, right? So we can call it real or not, but that is a huge chunk of the digital economy right there. And the fact that we're now translating and shifting some of the value away from just the gaming companies, and there's essentially a transfer of wealth through this tokenization to the participants in that game, is a very interesting model. I find it a fascinating way to think about where we could go, not just with games, but things like, you know, AI research or something else, right? Where we're all participating in the digitization of information and somehow being rewarded rather than just being sort of passively having our data extracted. And I want to talk to you about data because I know you're interested in it. Top. What you know, you've just got so many different pieces going on with this, you know, but entirely Thai-focused conglomerate. What are you excited about? What do you mean? What in sort of where do you see in this Web3 environment the most interesting forms of new utility, new use cases, and tokenization?
Sure. The reason why I have so many pieces is because I've been in this space for 8 years now. Okay. Similar time with Jeremy and Beryl, but I've been focusing on just one country, and we fully conquered Thailand. And Thailand is a small country, but surprisingly we are quite advanced in terms of blockchain applications and use cases. For example, the Thai central bank governor was here at Davos last year on the stage, talking about CBDCs, central bank digital currency. It was going to be launched in Q4 last year, but we got a bit delayed, to Q1 this year. But we're going to start with the wholesale, not the retail, wholesale CBDC first. Thai central bank is working with the MAS, Singapore MAS, for the wholesale remittance between the two countries, and that's the first real blockchain use cases. Or last year was a tough year with FTX, the unregulated players messing the space up, but the regulated players are being punished. Even the regulation is very advanced. For example, in June this year, there'll be a new requirements on capital requirements, NCR, on top of our customers' deposits. We have $2 billion worth of customers' deposits right now, and we keep 10% on the hot wallet. Dollar to dollar, 1-to-1, but we have to have an additional $200 million of our own cash on top. Right? So we need to. Thailand is quite advanced, but we don't have this standardization of governance or transparency yet. And another issue is the standardization on the interoperabilities that we discussed this morning. On the future of capital market, the blockchain application on the future of the capital market. The previous session that I attended, the CEO of New York Stock Exchange, she said that T+2 settlement time is no longer acceptable in today's world, right? And
been saying that for a very long time, but yes.
So they're exploring, DLT, blockchain. But for Thailand, we are, planning to issue a separate, what we call an investment token, which is a separate license from a crypto token, where traditional finance can tokenize all kinds of values, ranging from government bonds. We can tokenize government bonds. We can tokenize carbon credit trading. We can tokenize FX, right, currency exchange, electricity unit, right? Just a bit of background to the audience here. With the blockchain technology, it creates digital scarcity versus the internet that it creates digital abundance. For the first time in humanity that we are able to achieve digital scarcity. That means we can have a digital representation. Tokenization is a digital representation of values, right? Meaning that we can upload any kind of values online into the digital economy, meaning that tokenization will be the underlying foundation of the digital economy going forward. We can tokenize anything now. And in Thailand, we are issuing a separate investment tokens so that there'll be a new fundraising method right, going forward, which is quite advanced compared to others.
Yeah, I think the capital markets use case is I keep saying the word use case, but it is one of those ones that's immediately understandable. And I think also potentially, Timo, is one that translates directly to a question that governments and regulators, because they've regulated capital markets so heavily, this idea that we can tokenize these real-world assets, that we can turn a bond into a fractionalized version of a digital bond or a real estate or an energy claim or whatever. Do you have any thoughts on this? Because from a regulatory perspective, are regulatory regimes ready in Europe for the kind of tokenized capital market investment token idea that Top's talking about?
Well, to a certain extent, yes, we are eagerly waiting for EU views and recommendations on various issues concerning Web 3.0. As a basic problem is that none of those tokenized or crypto actors want to have a national regulation. So this is a huge beef in US, I'm aware of that, with the CEC and so forth. But we need to have some clarity. Now, we have three issues that concern a politician. If I go to meet voters and I start talking about tokens and cryptos, so they say it's a scam. We all read the papers, it's a scam. So there is a case to be made, and there you need to kind of convince people that there really is a utility. So transparency, ironically, is issue number one, because you're supposed to have the transparency with blockchain, but then all these scandals have done with the lack of transparency. Second is the issues of trust and identity. I think these will be very important in the future. How do we ensure that relevant identification is taken care of in a blockchain environment, also beyond finance? That we need to make a compromise. And the third one is obviously trust in general. So these are the issues that we are dealing with. And a lot of new players and actors in Web 3.0 world are not something that reflect very well in existing legislation. Take a Dado, for instance. So where does legislation stand for? Who's representing a blockchain or a crypto exchange if it's a Dao or a Web 3.0 entity? I was very excited about what you were saying about gaming and what's the difference between gaming and other activities in the digital world is becoming kind of blurred. For instance, the most promising cases of metaverse experience are games. And you have a lot of real-world entertainment already in the gaming world. You have Ariana Grande in Fortnite. You have US TV shows in Fortnite. So there's a really interesting avenue on there, and I'm sure that they'll be really promising.
So let's open this up to discussion about we didn't want to make this necessarily a regulation discussion, but I think it's an interesting way to think about this, because when you start talking about these interesting applications that Web3 apply, you're saying gaming and entertainment and so forth, right? We wouldn't think of regulating entertainment, right? I mean, all of a sudden you've got all sorts of free speech concerns and everything else here. There's regulation of all sorts of behavior around that, but it's I think one of the problems, Jeremy, in the way that these debates have been happening around crypto and tokens is that there's a blurring of the lines between what is the actual product and the application versus the underlying technology. And I mean, how do you think about that particular challenge?
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of break down the different layers of this, I think. Like blockchains themselves are basically operating systems. They're new operating system layers on the internet. And it's not the role of a financial regulator to regulate, operating systems. Just like, financial regulators or departments of commerce aren't regulating the World Wide Web as a technology. So you have a base layer, and the technology is indifferent to the application, just like TCP/IP, the protocol of the internet, is totally indifferent to the application. Extremists can use it, and free societies can use it, and defense departments can use it, and everyone can use TCP/IP. There's no bias there. And so blockchains are this kind of base layer that is there. That you don't regulate that. Now there is this invention, right, of digital commodities, and digital commodities now exist, and digital commodities have economic value, and they're traded like other commodities, and so there are regulators for trading commodities, and there are regulations for commodities exchanges, and so that's coming into play, and actually there's a lot more regulation on the way in terms of digital asset commodities exchanges and the like. The blurry part starts to happen when you come up to the next layer, where you have people building applications, and those applications are incredibly varied. Someone could be building an application that is for storing different parts of your digital identity and presenting that digital identity to other applications. Well, who should regulate that? Should anyone regulate that? Should standards consortia be involved in that? That's not a financial regulatory matter, but it's important to everyone that there be standards. Or you have people building applications exactly like Yield Guild games and some of these Web3 games, right? They have digital tokens. And those digital tokens can represent real world assets and virtual assets. And it's probably not the job of a financial regulator to supervise in-game assets. I don't think anyone would want that. And we have parallels from the development of the internet. There was a time when people thought that if you wanted to stream audio, that you needed a radio broadcast license. And that's absurd to us right now. I can take out my phone and I can stream audio to anyone in the world I want, and I don't need a license. There might be a great firewall in some places where they might censor me, but I have the freedom to do that, and regulators adapted to that. And so, the digital assets that exist, that represent value, that are connected to virtual assets and real world assets, these lines are blurred, and these are increasingly global. And so we have to, my belief, and this gets to the core of your question, I think, is governments have to do the hard work of coming up with statutory definitions of digital assets and clearly classifying, like, what is an investment token? What is digital property? What is a digital currency? What is a digital commodity? And then, and if there are companies that are involved in those, either issuing or intermediating them, are there rules that are needed? That's hard work that governments have to do. They can't just throw their arms in the air and say, oh, we already have regulation, we should just apply it. There's hard work to do. This is like when the internet emerged. There was hard work to do. So I think that's really the work in front of us, is we have to get into the topology and definitions, and then figure out the kind of risk reward against the levels of kind of licensing that you might have around some of those activities.
I want to throw to questions in just one moment, but I want to pick up just a little bit more on this, and maybe both Beryl and Top could weigh in here, because this topology idea, the idea of like what language are we using to define these different types of tokens? My sense is that the reason why politicians maybe get confused is because it's been overly associated with speculation in markets. That the framework with which we talk about, and this is actually maybe the industry's fault as much as anything else, these assets, is through this lens of a speculative investment activity. And it's why people like Gary Gensler, the chairman of the SEC, basically says every token is a security, and then now we've got nothing but this sort of limited framework to think about it. How do you think we should, because you clearly do not want to be, the NFTs that you're dealing with and with Yield Guild Games, you don't want them to be treated like a security, right? And it just seems entirely inappropriate, because if it's just like a baseball, we wouldn't want a baseball trading card to be regulated by the SEC. How do you look at this?
Well, this is very interesting, right? Like there are existing regulatory frameworks, and sometimes when you actually speak to regulators in different parts of the world, they'd like to actually find an existing framework and apply to you when it is in fact a new innovation in the space, right? Like an NFT is a non-fungible token, which could actually be applied to art, could actually be applied to a gaming asset, could actually be applied to an identity, and trading those NFTs doesn't necessarily convert to like a security, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the challenge. And do you think the Thai legislation, the Thai new regulations that are coming out are going to appropriately distinguish between investment tokens and non-investment tokens and currencies and commodities?
I think they're in the progress of differentiating different types of tokens, and they're learning on the go together with the developments of the market. Mm-hmm. But for me, to answer your questions on regulations and how strict we should be, keyword here is fintech. No blockchain companies call themselves as a financial company. No, they don't call themselves as a technology company either, because we are talking about digital representation of values here. Right? We can't move fast and break things like Facebook, because even if imagine in-game assets, if the value gets bigger and bigger, we could have another FTX, right, on the in-game assets too, or laundering money or tourist financing with the in-game assets as well. So we cannot move fast and break things and have no KYC, no regulations at all. But at the same time, we don't call ourselves a financial company. We can't move slow and be too strict, too costly. Otherwise, 2 billion people are still going to be unbanked. Yeah. Because the cost of traditional banking is too high.
Yeah,
from
that's a good point. I mean, these tokens are valuable, and that gives them this kind of money-like, financial-like quality, even if they are literally just game objects and things, right? So it's a blurry line situation. I need to jump to the audience, though, because this is a key part of the way that we do things here, and open it up to questions, and maybe I'd like the Minister to weigh in on some of this that we were just talking about. So is there a question in the audience for us, for this panel? Or a comment? Yep, here we have in the middle over here. So if you don't mind, when you take the mic, please stand up and introduce yourself first.
Hello, my name is Irshad. I'm from the Global Shapers community, Kuala Lumpur Hub. I just want to hear your guys' thoughts in regards to a non-custodial solution and how does that complements tokenization and stuff like that. Thank you.
I'll take a crack. One of the innovations of this space is that if you have something like digital property, that you can actually take possession and control of the digital property. And that's really powerful. So whether that be a representation of a dollar, the representation of a currency, your own identity data, whatever that would be, is that you can have possession and control. And this is, I think, part of the fundamental design of this technology is we're trying to move away from these giant centralized corporations or governments consolidating all of our data or consolidating our value. And so that's a core promise of the technology is that, what's now called self-custody, that I can possess my digital property and I can choose who can access my identity information or how I want to transfer a digital item that I own to someone else. And so it is, from my perspective, it's critical that we ensure that direct control of our digital property can happen. And right now, the end user that wants to do that today, it's still too steep of a learning curve, and it's really scary. So all of this is built up around cryptography and using cryptography to kind of control who can access things. And so using public key cryptography, which is the foundation of this, most people don't want to know about how to protect their private keys or what a seed phrase is. These are concepts that your average person would be really scared of. And they're scared of like, wow, you mean if I lose this, then I've lost my identity, or I've lost my money, or I've lost my property. And so it's still a problem that's not yet solved at a large scale. But I think it's interesting, you know, there's this, you know, boom and bust cycle in these things. But one of the areas that's getting a huge amount of capital right now, and we've funded some startups in this space, and I think some of the smartest venture capitalists have as well, is people who are trying to build the next generation of what that end user, control your own data, control your own identity, control your own money in a self-custody manner, and trying to solve that in a way where 1 billion people or 2 billion people could do that and not be handing it over to the Facebooks and Googles.
Or the Sam Bankman-Frieds.
Or to the Sam Bankman-Frieds, to centralized entities that are black box to us. Right. So it's a fundamental thing, and I think it's actually my view is there's a kind of fundamental human right to be able to control your own property and data. Maybe not every government agrees, but I think that's built into this technology, and it's really important.
Okay, Tim, I want to let me preface first. I think Jeremy said something I think was very interesting, very relevant to a European politician, and that is this idea that this architecture, this data architecture, is actually fundamental to this new internet environment, where we get away from the centralization of data itself. This whole problem of data and privacy really being, you know, one way to look at that. And of course, you know, the European Union is sort of, I think, at least in terms of its concerns about these matters, far ahead of any other, you know, government body trying to grapple with this.
Indeed.
Do you see the solutions that Jeremy's alluding to here as the way forward, and are governments recognizing that this, in fact, whether it's GDPR compliant or not, is in fact the way forward?
I totally agree with Jeremy, and I think it's indeed a hugely important question, and we should move beyond privacy. So our main concern has been privacy, which means that people, the mindset is that people should restrict the data that they give away. If cancer research needs my data, I'm more than willing to give everything I have, even private information, if that helps for this good purpose. So interestingly, back in 2014, in Finland, they started this association called mydata.org, and that became global in 2018. And our ministry, the Ministry of Transport and Communications, was the founders of this movement. And the core idea is exactly what you described here, is that people should control their own data and be able to divulge it wherever they want, and also find wherever they don't want it to be handled. And this could be helped by all these kind of decentralized operators that could be helpful there. And certainly our government and Finland has been proponent of this kind of human-centric control of data, free flow of data for almost 10 years. And certainly the European legislation reflects some of these issues, but we're still kind of focused on the privacy issues. And rightly so, because you can kind of detect identities by the transactions made in those ledgers. But still, we should go forward. We should go towards trust and find all these useful ways of enforcing trust to be able to really utilize this huge amounts of data with the new tools.
Beryl, I would like to bring you in because you talked a little bit yesterday when we chatted about this idea of accumulating data around your gaming behavior and this becoming a new form of identity. But just before we do, I just want to check, is there anybody with a question like this? Don Tapscott.
Don Tapscott. I'm chair of the Blockchain Research Institute. I have a question for Jeremy, but first, it's a really good conversation. First of all, let me agree on this point about GDPR. We don't need, I mean, it's sure necessary, but it's insufficient. We don't need governments protecting our data. We need to own our data, because this represents our digital identities, and they've been expropriated from us. This is the asset class of the digital age, and we need to get our identities back so that we can manage them responsibly for ourselves. I wanted to just underline Michael's point about taxonomy. say something about that. Like tokens of representation, another way of thinking of it is as a container, where value kind of goes in the container. And right now, we do need a taxonomy because of the problem that Jeremy alluded to. Because there are natural asset tokens like carbon credits. There are protocol tokens that enable decentralized models to work. There are tokens that represent art and music, NFTs and so on. So we spent some time thinking about this and developing a taxonomy. I think over time, though, that will go away. Because just like a website was sort of a container for information for the old internet, tokens will become containers of value, and there'll be so many different types of them, and it'll be pointless, really, to have a taxonomy to talk about all that. Anyway, editorial comment. Jeremy, Circle submitted for the Fed's request on CBDCs. I wonder if you could just comment on that, because it was a pretty articulate argument that stablecoins can do everything that CBDCs can do without a lot of the liabilities and costs and so on. And I was just interested, do you apply that also to wholesale CBDCs as well?
Yeah, it's one of the most frequently asked questions that we deal with. But I mean, look, this is a very long topic, and I'll try and keep it short because just in the interest of time. Virtually every innovation in payment systems and electronic money has been driven by the private sector. Wire messaging, paper checks, ATM machines, credit cards, debit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay tokenization, stablecoins. Every single innovation is private sector led. And I don't think that's going to change in the realm of digital currency. And in fact, that is the case today. There's far more digital dollar transactions happening on blockchains than central bank digital currency transactions happening even in China. That's the most advanced in this space. And in fact, people in China don't even want to use the CBDC because the utility value of digital money in Alipay and WeChat is so high. Now, we have to differentiate between the technology and the innovation cycles that are involved in what end user entities interact with, that's firms and households and individuals, from the core architecture of central bank money itself. So I once asked the chief information officer of the Federal Reserve, what's the architecture of the dollar? Because I know, the dollar is a technology system, and I'm a technologist. And he said it's a Oracle database cluster on Sun Microsystems. I said, okay, that's an old architecture, but you could imagine a new architecture for the core systems of the Fed, built on cryptographic money, distributed ledger technology, and that would improve settlement between them and their major participants and other central banks. And so that's the wholesale argument. And there sort of seems to be an emerging consensus that yes, central banks should throw out old software and hardware and replace it with more modern technology. There's no one who's going to argue with that, right? Like, why should we hang on to 30-year-old technology to operate those core systems? But if you're talking about facing the market and the innovation cycles that deliver value for billions of people and tens of millions of businesses, that is not going to come from governments. That is absolutely only going to come from the private sector. And it would be very difficult to see how it would happen otherwise.
So I saw another hand up a moment ago, but before I do, Beryl, I just want to get back to that other point, because I thought it was just struck me as an interesting thing for you to weigh in on, where we were talking about my data, parceling it out, and that's sort of something of a static idea, but we also talk about a dynamic thing as well, right? There's this new interactivity that comes with this tokenized digital gaming environment that becomes a data pool in and of itself that then become a reputational thing. Talk a little bit, and you're actually developing tech around this, right?
Yes, that's right. Based out of a gamer's activity. So within our gamer pool, we would actually know how many hours they actually spend in a game, which games they spend their time in, how much they actually earn, how many times do they trade a particular asset, and with that particular data, there's just so much that you can build on top of it, right? It's very rich. So for example, you could actually extend other forms of financial services, like other forms of uncollateralized loans, right, for emerging market gamers. So what we're doing right now is badging. We call them soul-bound tokens. So we're tokenizing identity by looking into their achievements, being able to us being able to capture the skill that they have for a particular game, being able to measure the achievement that they've gone through, and then creating a soul-bound token or an NFT by tokenizing that. And then based out of all these NFTs that a particular person collects, any other institution or any Web3 application can look into that data and match certain services based out of that.
Fascinating. So I did see a hand. I think I saw Brett's. Did your hand was up? Okay, sorry. I'll come to you in a moment. We've got 5 minutes left, so let's try to keep it tight.
My name is Brett McDowell. I'm the chair of the Hedera Network Governing Council. And this is a question, quick premise. So the USDC's tokenization of the US dollar, well understood case study of tokenization. In-game asset, NFT tokenization of in-game assets, well understood case study. My question, maybe for Top or anyone else, what next asset class do you think, what's the next real world thing that you are kind of excited about being tokenized? Kind of the next interesting tokenized economy asset?
Sure. Last year, I attended quite a few meetings in the Southeast Asian region. You know, G20, B20, even the Indonesian government, they are announcing a carbon credit trading marketplace. In Thailand, we're working on a similar thing. Same issues. We need standardization and interoperability for carbon credit, trading. Then here comes the blockchain application to tokenize carbon credit. In Thailand, we're thinking about issuing an investment token, meaning that we can tokenize real estate. It's a new fundraising method, right? Or even during the pandemic, the Central Bank of Thailand used to talk to us and said that because Thailand relies so much on tourism, and when there's no tourist coming into the country, the FX spread is impacted, and there's not enough liquidity. They were asking if we could create an order book exchange instead of trading against an intermediary, bricks and mortar intermediaries. Can we create an order book? Can we tokenize FX so that we can have a deeper liquidity pool, right, and narrower spread? Last year, the Minister of Finance issued a digital bond, but only the primary market, meaning that if you need to use cash right away, you have to wait for another 3 years until the maturity. Right? Why can't we tokenize government bonds and trade them on a secondary marketplace? The technology is ready.
The ideas around this phenomenal, right? The liquidity that suddenly goes into a bond market, the idea that you can fractionalize real estate. People say maybe we will do away with rent. Everybody will be a part-time owner of their stake in a place that they're residing because they've got a fractionalized piece in it. The shifting of mindsets around how these economies function once you sort of bring that power of the digitalization in there is quite profound.
One thing that some people might think is mundane, but I think it's very exciting is you're seeing more and more major brands that want to replace their kind of proprietary databases of loyalty points. They want to replace those with non-fungible tokens. And so why? Well, one is it goes from a closed loop ecosystem to an open, interoperable open loop ecosystem. The second is that those then can manifest themselves with a cryptographic proof of this that other applications can rely upon. And so my level of Nike value, and I can then prove that to the Boston Celtics stadium, and they can manifest various forms of entitlements. So credentialing, entitlements, affinity, is a vast area for innovation, which has largely been kind of in these very closed down systems. That's a space where tokenization, I think, is unlocking a lot. And you're seeing big companies launching things in that space almost every week. It seems like we're seeing things happening there.
Really quick, we're short. If you stand up and give us, take the mic and introduce yourself if you don't mind. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Joseph Bismarck.
I'm sorry, just stand up.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I'm founder of QI based in Hong Kong. Anyway, it took me, I heard about the blockchain crypto some back 11 years ago, but it took me like 6 years to really onboard myself. And I actually start realizing that I have to do a lot of work. I have to do the work myself. So my question would be, are you expecting that the majority of the population would actually move into the digital economy, because it's very difficult. Like I made a transfer, I made a mistake. It took me 6 months to actually retrieve the coin with a slight mistake. So it's not as easy as banking right now.
Such an important question, guys. So yeah, Top.
I read a book that Bill Gates wrote last year, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. He said we have to remember two numbers, 52 and 0. We are emitting 52 billion tons per year of greenhouse gas emission, and we need to reach net zero, right? And out of the 52 billion tons, 26% comes from fossil fuel. What about the other 74%? It comes from the clothes we wear, transportation, food. Pretty much we have to reduce every dimension, because during COVID, when there's no traveling, no restaurants, no hotels, we only saved 2 billion tons. We're still emitting 50 billion tons in the book, he said. That means we have to reduce every dimension. How can we not get on digital economy? Because we don't have planet B, we only have planet A. Meaning that we have to, I guess the solution here is to humanize the language, as well as humanize the technology.
So you're basically saying it's absolutely imperative that we learn, and therefore we will. But there still resolves how do we get there? What's the bridge?
Yeah, and just to comment on this, I think it's a very interesting EU initiative to produce a digital product passport that would track the material flows from the raw material to the product, that could enhance responsible economics in consumer products. And this should be done by Web 3.0. This should be, the data should be collected in such a manner that would be decentralized. And this could be a kind of, if not use case, then a case study for something responsible and really useful for climate crisis mitigation.
All right. So we have to wrap it up. I think that, we were talking about, tokenized economies coming alive, and I think hopefully you heard a lot of case studies here across this Web3 environment that's emerging. We talked about some of the challenges that we face in terms of regulation and so forth. I'm not sure we fully answered your question, I'm afraid, in terms of how do we get this technology to be more user-friendly, but it is a key element. If we're going to unlock this incredible power of these tokenized economies, we're going to have to make this thing accessible to people in a way that doesn't become this big barrier. So that's one thing to take away from the rest of this. I'm going to wrap it up there. A round of applause for this tremendous panel. And thank you all for coming. Okay.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Well done.